Hello, everybody. It's week 17, and it is our last week. This is it. So, we're going to be wrapping up here. And the only test this week is just our 12 and 13 test. And that will be our, I don't know, I wouldn't really call it a final exam. I'll call it final test. Okay. It's the last topic that we're covering. And I think I made that pretty clear. And you'll be able to use your notes. And I will post the test on Thursday morning. So you can take it anytime Thursday or Friday. Okay. And it's really more almost like an assignment than a test, but that'll be coming up later this week. I am here at school. You can tell here. And I had some students coming in throughout the day working in the lab, mostly for my computer literacy class. And I'm working on a last HCTV for the semester. So that's the episode where we do some bloopers and outtakes. We have some announcements, and we'll do the looking back part two. So some highlights from the fall. So if you're interested in that, they'll be out hopefully tomorrow. And this week here, we're doing a Zoom today. I'm going to go over a few things here in a minute. Then on Thursday and Friday, if we would have been here in person, I know this class was never an in-person class, it would be half days. So they were kind of asking like, about, can you move some afternoon Zooms to the morning? I don't know. I think for this class, it probably doesn't really matter because it wasn't a hybrid class to begin with. So I'll probably keep my usual Zoom time on Thursday. And by then, honestly, I probably don't have much to talk about. Maybe just a few tips and stuff and a few wrap up things. And just like with this one, I'll record it and share it. So if someone misses it, they can watch it later. Okay. And you probably have all been seeing the news, what's going on. I'm just going to touch on that real quick here because it does relate to the part of 12 and 13 from 12 about politics and I guess economics. Economics and politics are very much interconnected. But just to touch on this briefly, just because we were talking about, and when I say touch on, I mean touch on from a sociological point of view. Okay. Um, and again, the what I'm about to say is connected to a sociology perspective. One thing when they study American politics is they often look at demographics. You probably have heard of that. What different groups vote for which different parties. And there are some things that are kind of stick out is going one way or another. For example, if you got white male rural voters, their majority go for Republicans, and if you've got African Americans, the majority go for Democrats. And then most other groups are, not as obvious. Okay, some might say, what about young people? Well, young people in recent years have been going more for Democrats than Republicans, but there's plenty of young people that support the Republicans too. Um, when they look at demographics around the country, this may sound a little bit ironic, but the Republican Party economically is more the party, and this would not criticizing them. This is just the way they'd probably even describe it, is a more business corporate oriented party. So, many would say they favor the rich and the more upper classes and things like that. And I mean, quite frankly, there's a lot of truth to that. At the same time, they also have a huge amount of support among some of the poorest people in the class. And, and, why do so many low income people support the Republican Party? And working class people, poor people, why, they get quite large numbers, especially in the South, especially in rural areas, especially among white males. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Some may, part of politics is not just economics, but social values. So when it comes to issues like guns or abortion or things like that, it tends to get a certain amount of people voting one side or the other, depending on positions. But it is kind of interesting, and this brings us to the what happened over the weekend. We had a huge amount of people. Now, Another interesting phenomena is how much of this is really politics and how much is what's called cult of personality or populism, where it's more about a leader than a party. And sociologists would study that kind of stuff, like, okay, what people are following, in this case President Trump, and then among those people, what are they doing, what are their beliefs, what are their motivations. And of course the vast majority are not radical or violent, but this weekend some of them were. I mean, that was pretty obvious this past week. And there's a lot of debate going on, to what extent was that because of things the president said, to what extent wasn't it? And people can debate that. I'm not going to jump on either side there and say where all the blame should go or where it shouldn't go. And of course, we have divisions in our country who's watching what news media, and they cover it differently. And from a sociology point of view, they're always interested to see, this here. And I'd say one that stuck out the most is the demographic differences. Trump and a lot of the top people in the Republican Party come oftentimes from very wealthy backgrounds. They spend a lot of their time around very wealthy people. They fly private jets. They live in the most exclusive parts of the country. Trump's Florida place, Mar-a-Lago, is right next to Palm Beach, which is, you don't get much richer than that in Florida. And of course, he has Trump Tower in New York City, where it's a lot of billionaires and stuff like that there. And but a lot of supporters are working class people, lower income people. A lot of the ones that were protesting, or some would say rioting, for the ones that went in the Capitol, were, when they stories are coming out, they're just, a lot of them aren't doing that great. They're kind of down and outers and relatively low income. So it's kind of interesting phenomena in our politics over that. But because we're talking about economics and politics and that, for part of 12 and 13, this is all in the news. There's people making all kind of commentary of who's who and what's what and who's supporting whom. And plus, we just had an election. And whenever there's an election, there's always a lot of discussion over who voted. And they'll break down like suburban women, and suburban women went this election mostly Democratic. So that helped Biden. And then but not all suburban women did, obviously. There were still large amounts that didn't. They look at people live in big cities, and big cities typically go more Democratic. And different states and different parts of the country and different education levels. They'll look at in college towns. College towns go mostly Democratic. Fairly well-off suburbs often will go quite Republican. A lot of rural areas go Republican, and then of course you got other groups, Hispanic Americans. Hispanic Americans go Democrat, but there's still a sizable minority of them that go heavily Republican, especially in Florida among Cuban Americans. And then of course they break down every other kind of demographic you can think of. Men, women, young, old, poor, middle class, rich. Ironically, a lot of wealthy people have been going Democratic. You might think, why would they go Democratic when the Republican Party has been more the business and the elite and that? But there's always, and I would say the majority of the wealthy people go Republican, but there's definitely a fair amount that also go Democrat. So there's a lot of interesting things from a political and economic point of view in American politics. So I thought I'd mention that, especially since a lot of it's in the news. Back to our class. What's going on this week? Okay. Okay. So this week, the test, like I said, I'm going to put that out on Wednesday. And that's just going to be Thursday, excuse me. This test I'm going to put out Thursday. It's just going to be a Google form, chapter 12 and 13 from the notes. You can use your notes, and it should not be hard. It's going to be more like an assignment. I put 2 assignments up here. I'll start with the first one. The first one this week, we're focusing more on chapter 13, which is education and religion. So what I did here, there's tons and tons of stuff out there about education. Really, really big topic right now. A lot of debates over what we should be doing, where we should be going in American education. So one video I got is only 10 minutes and it's by somebody about your age. Okay, a 17-year-old girl. And she talks about the future of education. And she gives some of her own story of family coming from India, her parents and that, and growing up, and you know the importance of education, and how it can obviously play a huge role in your future. Then I got this guy here. It's a little more, like I said, this class in some way leans a little bit toward college level material. So if you're that kind of person, great. It's going to be easy. But if you're not, it's going to be a little bit, you got to give a little thought to it. And that's called the Education Revolution. And again, in both of these videos, like almost everything I share in this class, it's opinion. There's a lot of opinion in here. So you may agree with it, you may disagree with it, maybe half and half. So when you do the assignment, which comes attached to these videos, you can include your opinions, obviously. And so that's just thinking about education. And of course, we could spend a whole semester talking about education. Religion and society. I do an assignment. There's a handout here. There's 4 videos. I'll click on the handout here just to talk about the 4 videos. Okay. The first video is about religious freedom in America. And it's from a conservative organization called the Heritage Foundation. And like I keep saying over and over, almost everything I share in here has an opinion, has a viewpoint. And my biggest objective in here is, first of all, to expose you to these various perspectives. And the second is to encourage what I call critical thinking, where you think it through, you think through what they're saying, think about what you might agree with, what you might disagree with, or what you're not sure about. And that's what I encourage you to do. So this is a short video that focuses on religious freedom from a fairly conservative point of view. Okay. Then number 2 is another video. It's like a news segment that's covering a trend that has been true. Now, it's a trend that you may be part of. It's a trend you may like. It's a trend you may dislike, depending on your viewpoints. It's about how America is becoming less religious. Now, on worldwide standards, the U.S. has always been very religious, especially going back to our foundings. We had a lot of people that came here fleeing religious persecution in Europe, and the Puritans and so forth. And when they set up our Constitution, a big one of our rights is freedom of religion. So we have all kind of religious groups in the U.S. U.S. has a higher percentage than many other Western countries of people who engage in religious practices, go to churches, synagogues, mosques, or whatever they may do. And we got always changing demographics as to like what religions are growing, what religions are declining. And when I say religion, I mean it both in the big picture, like Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, and I mean it also at the more micro level. Micro level means how are the Baptists doing compared to the Catholics, compared to the Methodists, compared to the Mormons, compared to the Jews and different branches of Judaism. You got Orthodox Jews and Reform Jews and conservative Jews, which conservative, by the way, is a literal type of Judaism. It's not a reference like you'd say conservative Christians. It's one of the 3 main branches or whatever types of Judaism. So they got Reform, which is very liberal type of Judaism, Orthodox, a really strict type of Judaism, and then conservatives actually somewhere in the middle. So people study all these kind of trends, which ones are growing, which are declining. Now, some religious groups in the U.S. grow because of immigration. For example, if the number of Hindus in America goes up or the number of Muslims in America goes up, it's often connected to immigration. Among American religious groups, there's been a lot of changes going on, and changes about people, whether or not they attend religious services or go to churches or engage in things like that. And there's been trends downward in a lot of those areas. Now, having said that, And it doesn't mean everywhere's downward. There can be obviously growing churches and synagogues and so forth. There can be areas of the country where it's going up instead of down, and different ethnic groups and so forth. So there's various trends going on. So this would be more like it's a news segment, but it's more about some of the changes going on and what may be the reasons for that. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? That's the kind of stuff you'd want to learn and think about. Okay, then I got a video on 5 major world religions. It's just a straightforward educational video. It doesn't go into a lot of depth. None of these videos are all that long. And you just basically just list them and write a couple of facts about each. And what's going to be covered in there? You got Hinduism, which mainly from India. You got Buddhism, mainly from Asia. And then I don't know if you know this relationship, but Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all have connections with each other. Let me explain briefly. Judaism came first. And for those, I don't know if any of you are Jewish. If you're not, if any of you are Christian, the Old Testament of the Bible is the Jewish Bible. Okay. Jews who do not practice Christianity have something called the Tanakh, which is the Jewish Bible, and it's the exact same thing as the Christian Old Testament. Okay. So the same thing. The only difference is the books are in slightly different order, but all the same stories, all the same people, Moses, Joseph, Abraham, all that's the same. Where Christianity and Judaism differ is when Jesus came along, at least 1,500, 2,000 years after Judaism started under Abraham, then that Jesus was Jewish and the apostles were Jewish and there's all Jewish, but they broke off and said that Jesus was the Jewish Messiah. If you know the story like that, or maybe some of you go to church and have heard all the stories. And for those that don't know, the word Christ means Messiah. It just comes from the Greek instead of the Hebrew. And that broke off a new religion that branched off of Judaism that we call Christianity. And then after that, I'll be probably 5 more minutes. Yeah. Yep. After that, Christianity spread to non-Jews, and that was in the Roman area, the Roman Empire. Many of you know these stories if you've been in churches and that you hear about the Romans, and Jesus was crucified by the Romans and so forth. And so that hence starts the beginning of Christianity. And then, let's see, it would be about 700 years later, a guy in what is now Saudi Arabia. That time it was just the Arabian Peninsula, named Muhammad. He had visions. Okay, he had all these visions, and Muhammad was illiterate. And I'm not saying that as a criticism, that's a fact. I have Muslim friends who will say Muhammad was illiterate. And he had these visions, and he started reciting all this poetry, and his followers started writing it down. And that's what became what's called the Quran, which is the Muslim holy book. And some of the same characters and stories from the Bible come up in the Quran. Jesus is in the Quran. Abraham is in the Quran. Moses is in the Quran. Mary's in the Quran, but not in the same form. The stories are a bit different. They're shorter. It's, there's not exactly the same views of those people and events. And in Islam, Jesus is considered a great prophet, but not considered the most important person. They would call Muhammad that. They believe he's the main prophet and that Jesus was good, but he didn't quite get it right. I'm saying this is Muslim point of view. And then the teachings of Muhammad in the Quran became the foundation of another new religion called Islam. So Islam is the newest of the 5 religions from that video. But it's still been around 1,400 years now. So it's been a long, long time. And the way they view each other is Judaism came first. Christians view themselves as built on Judaism, but then the Jewish Messiah, who they believe is Jesus, was also reaching out to non-Jews. So it became more of a universal religion that started with the Jews and spread to include others. And then the Muslims will say, well, they didn't get it quite right either. Muhammad came along and he had to fix things, and Muhammad has the better versions of everything and what things are about and all that. And they have their own holy book and their own teachings and everything like that. So they would view themselves on top of that. Now, it is no secret, a lot of these religious groups, any of the five, have been involved in religious wars and conflicts, and radical groups of any one of them have existed in different places and times and done terrible things. Obviously, awesome people of any of these religions have done things too. And if you meet a lot of people from different backgrounds, you'll find, just like with anything, you'll find a lot of really nice people from different backgrounds, as you will find it, obviously some not so nice people of different backgrounds. But you should have a little bit of knowledge of what five of the major religions of the world are about. Okay. And we have all of them here in the United States. Okay. And so that's what the third one's about. The fourth one is just a crash course, just like you've been watching. There's kind of like cover the type of stuff you have in a sociology textbook. And that's about religion. It's just the same lady, and she's doing a crash course video on religion. And it'd be more from a sociological point of view. So that's what's going on with this. So I think you'll find it kind of interesting. I hope so. So it's not too hard. It's just those two assignments and our 12 and 13 tests, which will be later in the week. So knock out the TED Talks first, knock those out on or before Wednesday, knock out the Religion Society on or before Thursday, and then do the test either Thursday or Friday. So that's pretty much what we got going on here. And then if you look back throughout the semester, we've covered all kinds of topics and introductory topics and side topics and stuff in the news and stuff not in the news and ongoing social problems. And, so that's what's going on here. Any questions or anything? I'm going to pull out of here. You guys all still there? I never know for sure. You find any of these topics interesting? Any of you find whether it be politics or economics or religion or education interesting? There's so many things I'd love to cover, so many videos and documentaries and stuff. There just isn't time to cover it all. Okay, you guys still here? Okay, thanks for coming today. Hello. You're in the dark. You got red lights on today. Okay. If you're talking, I can't hear you, but I'm going to end the recording, but if anyone wants to hang around for a moment. Okay, everyone take care. Have a great last week here. And, do as good or as best you can in all your classes.